For what it's worth, I like most of the people in your crew. But groups fall apart. People get killed.
Then why did you bring me with you?
I'm just trying to give you the tools you need to make it. Like your jacket. It looks warm, but a walker will bite right through that. My sister Jamie had a good leather one. Wish I still had it. You could've.
What happened to your sister?
Seems we always want to talk about the end, don't we?
Now lately I've been thinking about this character and overall just being vastly amazed by the comments and watching the experience of people playing Season 2 and witnessing just how many people dislike Jane. With that, it sparked an interest in me to really try to understand her character in a deeper sense to get clarity as to why she does the choices she makes and the thought process behind them. So, let's get into trying to understand Jane as a character. First meeting of Jane is during the time where the group first arrive at House after getting captured at the ski lodge, as well as the moment where the group discuss plans to escape House. Where we first really get introduced to Jane is during the storm where the group is escaping House by going through the horde covered in walker guts. In this scene, she's put in the spotlight more since she came up with the plan to go through the horde. Once the group escape and meet up at the memorial, they ultimately decide that they'll look for the rest of the team, Nick, Luke, and Sarah, and by they, Jane and Clementine. From here on, as we see Clementine and Jane heading towards a nearby town that they think the rest of the crew are, Jane and Clementine begin to talk to one another, and in this moment is where we really get to know Jane as a character. As Jane is talking to Clementine, she mentions a few times that Clementine should consider being by herself rather than in a group she's staying in, due to how many people are either a liability or just so broken down to the point where they may snap on each other. With that, she tries to show Clementine skills and other pieces of useful information to help her along the way. That way she can handle herself more efficiently. On the other hand, we do get insight a little bit of her little sister Jamie, obviously talking about typical sister things like messing with each other and the sort. But with that, she being hinted by Jane that in the end didn't have the strength to make it, as she mentions multiple times about the little nuanced things she used to do. With this though, with her sister dead, it's practically the main reason for Jane's philosophy of how she sees and handles the new world. So eventually Clementine and Jane end up finding Luke and Sarah, and they see that both of them are trapped in one of the houses in the small town. Both Jane and Clem come in to help, but get into a situation where they have to leave the rooftop. Sounds like a plan until they realize that Sarah does not want to move, as she still is traumatized by the death of her father during the horde. Now there are two options, where you can either convince Sarah to come with or leave her. During this time though, Jane at first wants to help Sarah to come with, but shortly after decides that it would be best to leave her, even telling Clementine to not let her bring her down as well. Afterwards, depending if you left or kept Sarah, change the dialogue after they decide to go back to the memorial. So just to explain the story better, we'll go with the route of Sarah's not with the group. As they're heading back, they talk about whether or not saving Sarah was plausible and whether it was the right thing to do. But what's interesting is coming back to Jane, she tells Luke and Clementine that she's seen a similar problem that she had with her sister, saying how she tried to save her but couldn't since Jamie herself didn't want to keep moving. Jane saying how she had to keep pushing her to keep going. Jane says that both her and her sister got into a situation where they were cornered on the rooftop and couldn't get out unless they were to move to one rooftop to another. Jane says that she ultimately decided to leave her since that was what she wanted, since she couldn't convince nor physically was able to get her to keep going. Jane mentioning how this moment stuck with her for a long time, but saying she grew out of it, realizing that she was forcing her sister to essentially keep living.
Trust me, I tried to save Jamie too, but she gave up. And when you really look at it, maybe it's better this way. For everyone.
We were there for hours. You know, I should have gotten through to her. I should have done something. All I did was leave her behind.
Luke, you can't let it eat away at you.
Well, I can't forget it.
I dragged my sister across 4 states, and every morning she'd say she wasn't getting up. so I'd convince her, or push her, or goddamn carry her if I had to. Until this time, walkers cornered us, forced us up to the roof, and when they kept coming, I couldn't make her jump, couldn't throw her. So I tried something else. I told her she could have what she wanted, and I left her there. Jumped to the next building over by myself.
You left your sister?
This backstory of Jane's sister is practically the foundation of why Jane does the majority of the decisions she makes after this point in the story. With this backstory with her and her sister, you will notice that she's very hesitant of being in groups, just not being comfortable with loss in general, and just prone to isolating herself. And you can clearly see that she demonstrates these things in the story. But the main one that keeps reappearing is her slowly trying to accept herself as being part of the group and not isolating herself despite her experiences. A few examples being where she decides to leave from the observation deck after the walker attack due to her not wanting to see Clementine be put in a situation where she could be in trouble or potentially die, and with her witnessing her sister's death and the death of Sarah, that also amplifies her reasoning for leaving the group. With that though, she decides to come back after the fight with Arvo's group mainly because of Clementine, but also attempting to give the group a chance.
I'm not pissed. I'm glad you're back. I didn't want you to go in the first place.
Thanks. That's good. Because you're probably 90% of the reason I came back. And it'd probably get pretty annoying if you hated me the whole time.
Wouldn't want it to be annoying.
No, that would suck. I'm gonna try to make this work.
Another being where she's wary of being part of the company where the group were sharing a bottle of rum together. Though in these events she's able to overcome her fears, the main reason as to why I think she isolates herself, doesn't trust or wants to be a part of the group, and overall not wanting to see people suffer is because she wants to be in control. Luke himself was beginning to paint the picture himself in episode 4.
Yeah, she's trying to get the gift shop opened.
You know, I can't figure her out. I mean, she really lays it on the line, but at the same time, she doesn't show you anything that counts.
I'm still not sure what to think about her. She's strong, and she's been helping us, but she's cold.
Maybe, but nobody's that cold. I'm definitely starting to think we might need to branch out.
What do you mean?
Jane seems like the kind of person who gets tempered by hardship, you know?
The reason I say that for her is easier to run away from her problems and not confront groups and the sort because she's able to control the outcome. Why take the chance to bond, build relationships, and take the chance despite the possibility of suffering or something bad happening when you can run away and not have to deal with it and know the outcome? Which is why I think that was Jane's main message. To go alone and not have anybody drag you down to Clementine. Because one, Clementine to Jane reminds her of her sister Jamie, and because of that, I believe she was persuading Clementine to go alone and fend for herself, not just for her sake, but also knowing that she wouldn't be killed in the process of something happening within a group. But I believe for herself, she got so attached to Clementine that she decides to stay with the group after the fight with the Russians. It's crazy because she mentions that she probably should have left Clementine a few times, odds are, to avoid attachment.
All I can do is promise you I won't abandon you again. Which, to be fair, I've never done before. Even though I probably should have. A few times now.
Speaking of this attachment towards Clementine, you will see that it's very apparent during the scene of where Clementine tries to save Luke while the group was crossing the ice. I want you guys to take note here and realize the difference between all the interactions Jane has had up until this point, where she either avoids trying to help others despite most of the time them being able to be rescued, or just outright saying to herself or Clementine that this person is done for. Notice how her character just shifts in the scene right here.
I got you. Come on, you're gonna be okay. Go, to the house, we need a fire. Oh, fuck, she's gonna fucking freeze to death.
How the fuck did that happen?
There's a fireplace.
Jesus Christ.
We have to get her warm. She's gonna freeze to death.
For the first time since her sister Jamie, this is the first instance of where Jane actually decides to go against her way of thinking of well, ain't nothing we can do,
It's too late. Nothing more you can do.
and actually takes action to prevent a bad situation from escalating or a death outright. Observe how much of a panic she's in to prevent Clementine from dying. I would say that the main reason for this is Jane actually cares for someone other than herself and her sister Jamie, and so I believe Clementine is, in a way, in Jane's eyes, is like a sister to her, a replacement for her sister Jamie. Now to explain the fight between Jane versus Kenny, because boy does this take some real deep thinking as to why what happened. So as we find out after the incident with the ice and all, we find out that the next day that Mike and Bonnie betray the rest of the group to escape from Kenny, and while with that, Arvo shoots Clementine in the process. Long story short, the group didn't last that long, since as we see from Clementine's point of view, Kenny, Jane, and AJ are all in the working truck driving down the road. Not too long though, before asking if Clementine was okay, Jane and Kenny get into a heated argument towards one another before they abruptly come to a stop by barricading cars. Kenny decides they will go look to see if some of the cars carry diesel for the truck. Kenny heads out and Jane proclaims to Clementine that they could leave right now. Jane and Clem witness that the walkers are still active despite the weather, and so Jane tells Clementine to floor the truck to get him out of the situation. They soon end up crashing and decide to ditch the truck and head towards the location Kenny told them to go if anything were to happen during the time that he went out to siphon diesel.
Anything happens, I'll try to meet you there.
They all end up at the same location except for AJ, as Kenny asks Jane what did he do with him. Kenny goes out frantically looking for AJ, but before he gets back, Jane tells Clementine if anything were to happen, stay out of it, and that she'll finally see what Kenny really is.
Just stay out of it. Okay? Just trust me, Clem.
I don't understand!
You have to trust me. You're gonna see what he really is.
Kenny comes back infuriated and both of them start a fight with each other. The fight goes back and forth until Clementine has the decision whether or not to shoot Kenny or let Jane die essentially. Now for context sake, we'll go with Clementine decided to save Jane instead. Clementine soon hears the cries of AJ in a nearby car and soon realizes that AJ was alive the whole time and wasn't in any danger whatsoever. Jane in summary says that the reason as to why she did what she did was to have Clementine come with her and to show her that having Kenny in the group would have been dangerous for their well-being. And so from this point, Clementine can either decide to go by herself with AJ or go with Jane back to house for supplies, and thus the game shows us the last few scenes for both endings. A lot to unpack here, but here's my explanation as to why everything happened. When Kenny decided to leave the truck and Jane goes on to say that they should floor it out of their current situation, that whole situation with the vehicle crashing and her getting out of the vehicle, leaving Clementine in the dust with AJ was a setup. It was all planned for her to leave AJ in the nearest car to show Clementine Kenny's liability towards her essentially. The whole situation was messed up. What Jane did was selfish, manipulative, and straight up bad. She knew the whole time that Kenny had a problem, but she went ahead and further kept poking at him to get a reaction, so that she could manipulate Clementine into showing her that the Kenny that she knew from season 1 were all the problems that they both dealt with each other, and the situations they've been through is not the same caring guy, yet the opposite and dangerous. Not only that, but like I said earlier about Clementine in Jane's eyes, sees her as a sister or a replacement for her sister Jamie. I firmly believe that to be the case since she outright says to Clem multiple times that them together should leave and get away from the group, and after discovering AJ, that she did it for her sake.
I should never have lied to you, but I thought it was the only way you'd see.
Oh my god! Kenny!
You have to forgive me. Please. We can just leave all this behind us. Please. I did it for you, Clem.
Lastly, with everything I've said, I also believe it's a trust issue and a liability thing. She's been so isolating, not wanting to be associated with groups or build bonds, relationships with people, as well as seeing if people have underlying issue with them, whether it's physically, mentally, or anything that may deem them as a liability she stays away from, which again is mainly from her sister Jamie dying. Remember back when she said to Luke and Clementine where she left her sister because she realized that she didn't want to live anymore and she felt like she was essentially dragging her to keep going? I think because she felt she was dragging her sister along to keep living, she saw her as a liability in a way. So that may explain why she sees people like Rebecca, Kenny, and AJ like that, and more others, but you get the idea, as liabilities because it affects her as well as Clementine.
Sorry. Just making conversation. There was nothing.
No. What do you mean by that? Do with what? My baby?
I'm just looking at the worst case scenario. You and Clem won't be able to raise a baby by yourselves. Not out here. I just mean it's going to need food. And, you know, other stuff.
We'll look after it, together.
Even if that's the case, you can't always protect everyone.
And when something does happen, there's nobody there to help you.
How much help is Kenny gonna be? What he's going through? He's more of a liability than anything. And Rebecca's situation is not making things better back there.
So the last scene that I want to talk about is the scene where Jane ends up checking herself out after finding out that she was pregnant. If Clementine chooses to go with Jane, both end up going back to house for supplies like food and baby formula for AJ. Staying there for a while, probably a few weeks, on one of the days, Jane suggests to Clem she do an ink and perimeter sweep to help Clementine getting in the habit of being prepared for anything. Jane though says a few times that she isn't feeling well and tells Clem that she'll head inside to take a nap. After Clementine finishes checking the perimeter, she heads to the higher floors to see if Jane's awake. As she opens the door, she witnesses Jane hanging from the ceiling. Witnessing this, there's really only a few things that would explain why she would do that to herself. Now, a lot of people would say that she did it to not have to deal with the repercussions of her actions with Luke and now having to potentially raise a child, and so she took the easy way out to prevent herself from that lifestyle and responsibility. Another could be that she did it to not be a liability towards Clementine, potentially having to raise 2 kids by herself as well as only really having Clementine to look after her during her time of pregnancy. Or 3, similar to the first theory, she saw how much it affected Rebecca, and seeing how she died after delivering AJ, she might have been terrified of the fact that that could quite possibly be a situation she might deal with, so instead of going through that, she ended it right there. All in all, it's really up for debate on why she really did it. But to gather everything we just went through from what we understand about Jane, is that 1, the death of her sister is the main cause of a lot of her issues. Because of Jamie's death, Jane purposely isolates herself, distances herself from groups, and runs away if she ever gets into a situation where suffering and loss may occur. So with this, we see that Clementine is really the only person that she cares about since she knows she's different from the rest, and that she also reminds her of her sister, which further plays into why she did what she did with Kenny to have Clementine all for herself. In reality, she never got over her sister. Instead, the loss of her amplified a lot of her problems and ways of thinking in the present day.